Good morning, everyone. We are here for our weekly, well, it's actually bi-weekly, so we're doing it twice a month, free parenting webinar. And I am your host, Dr. Terry Egan. And today we're going to talk about a deeper look at reinforcement and punishment. So if you were here last time, we talked about spanking and what the research tells us and how it is a form of punishment. And so I wanted to kind of take that initial conversation that we had that was specific about spanking and really just look at the difference or what the meaning is behind reinforcement and punishment. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I don't want to spend a long time introducing myself because for those of you who have been here for a while, you know my name is Dr. Terry Egan. I own Charlotte Parent Coaching LLC as well as Dr. Terry Egan LLC. I'm a former school psychologist. And I'm an author, and I am host of the podcast One Day You'll Thank Me, which is a parenting podcast that talks about all different parenting topics, and we release new episodes every Wednesday, so please join us there. All right, so what the heck do we even mean by the difference between reinforcement and punishment? That's what we're here to discuss today. So let's talk about the definitions. And I remember even in undergrad, kind of struggling to understand the difference between positive and negative and reinforcement and punishment. So I'm going to tell you kind of the key words to focus on. Is reinforcement is anything that increases the likelihood of a behavior repeating. Okay? So most of the time we're adding something awesome or we're adding something desirable, and this motivates the child to do that behavior again because they are being rewarded for a behavior by receiving something desirable. Okay, so if we break down the word positive reinforcement, reinforcement means that we're increasing the likelihood of behavior. Positive means we're adding something. So positive doesn't mean like good, it just means the word means addition. So we're adding something that is likely to increase a behavior to be repeated. Negative reinforcement, we're going to talk about examples of all these things. Negative reinforcement is you're still increasing the likelihood of the behavior repeating, because remember the word reinforcement is in there, but we're doing it by taking away something unpleasant. So if positive means we're adding something that causes a behavior to be repeated, negative means that we're taking away something unpleasant that causes a behavior to be repeated. Okay. Positive punishment means we're decreasing the likelihood of a behavior repeating. So if you think of punishment, right? We punish our kids when we want them to stop doing something. But when you use positive punishment, you're adding in something to their environment that's undesirable. And that is the motivation behind them decreasing a behavior or eliminating the behavior. Negative punishment means that we're still decreasing the likelihood of the behavior repeating because we're talking about punishment. But when we add the negative term, we are taking away something pleasant from the environment. So the child is being punished by being denied something awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk about some examples here. All right, so before we talk about the examples, I do want to just kind of put it in context. Remember, every day, all day, we get feedback from our environment. Depending on what that feedback says, it tells our brain, keep doing that or stop it. That was a bad choice. So children are receiving the same sort of feedback from their environment. And they might learn that whining can get them what they want. They might learn that crying, if they get injured, results in an adult snuggling them. They learn that laying very quietly on the couch causes dad to forget bedtime. Aggression results in time away from peers. So there's a lot of things that kids experience in their environment that naturally reinforces or punishes a behavior. So we, as parents, have to be really mindful of what it is our children are being given feedback about and the nature of that feedback, because that shapes their behavior. And of course, our goal is to have kids behave in ways that are desirable, that are productive, that benefit them and their community at large. So we do have to be really careful about not accidentally reinforcing, which means causing a behavior to increase, a behavior that we find to be undesirable. So let's talk about some positive reinforcement. So positive reinforcement, once again, you're adding something to the environment with the goal of having that child's behavior be repeated. Okay. So if you pay someone to mow your lawn, you're telling them like, thank you, keep doing that. Here's payment. They feel satisfied. They feel really reinforced. So they're more likely to come back and mow your lawn. A teacher leaving a positive comment on your child's report card, rewarding a child for behaving in the store by giving her ice cream. So once again, we're adding something to the environment that increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring. Giving praise after someone works diligently to tie their shoes, giving a high five for holding the door for the elderly lady at the store. So these are all things that we're doing. We're giving something kind of awesome or something desirable that would cause that behavior to be repeated. So in this example, we've talked about all positive behaviors that we want to have repeated. I'm going to show you some different types of reinforcement. So there's a lot of times where we think of reinforcement as just consisting of giving somebody something, like giving a child a sticker, some ice cream, or an M&M if they go on the potty. But in reality, there's a lot of different versions of reinforcement. So I have them listed here. We have physical reinforcement, which is hugs, high fives, hand holding. It can be things like air kisses, winks, smile, like it's all involving kind of using your body or using their body to send them the message of this was great, keep doing that. Verbal praise, I think we know that this is most common, hey buddy, good job, or you did a great job cleaning up the Legos, thank you so much for your help. And whenever we give verbal praise, if we can associate that verbal praise by using the child's name, making eye contact, sometimes we pair it with something physical, like we give them verbal praise, eye contact, and we give them a hug so that they're really getting a multitude of reinforcers. We also do privileges, giving kids the opportunity to engage in an activity that's maybe not usually permitted. So you can stay up late tonight because you got all your homework done before the weekend started and you deserve some downtime. Or maybe you can have a friend over because you were great with your chores and you were helpful with your sister this week. Taking a special trip to a favorite place, whatever it is it's important for kids to feel like they're being celebrated when they're doing something well, and privileges can be a great way to do that. Another type of reinforcement is time or quality time. For most kids, spending quality time with a parent is really, really coveted, especially if that time is uninterrupted by work or another sibling, where they feel like the time is long enough to do an activity or have a conversation that they really feel invested in and enjoy. So that is like a really powerful tool that sometimes busy parents don't necessarily think about as being a positive reinforcer. But when you give your kids just attention, undivided attention, when they do the right thing, that is a very, very meaningful reinforcer for kids. And then the last one is tangible rewards. That is physical items. So stickers, books, toys, a favorite snack, whatever it is, it's something that you're giving the child that's a tangible item that sends, money would qualify as this, that sends the message to keep doing it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reinforce your child. And in this, we're talking about, positive stuff. We're talking about giving things like touch, time, praise, privileges. All right, let's talk about negative reinforcement. And remember, this is when you're taking away something undesirable as a way to increase their likelihood of doing the behavior. So you think about the students who turn in their study guide 2 days before the exam. And teachers might say, if you turn in that study guide 2 days before the exam, you get a homework pass. So then you don't have to do homework on another night. So that's a situation where they're taking away homework. They're taking away something undesirable to send the message of keep doing that, keep turning in your study guides early so that we know that you're working hard on studying for the exam. Okay, so this next example is a really good one because this is an example when you take away something negative, where you're taking something away, but you're reinforcing an undesirable behavior. Okay, because remember, reinforcement is reinforcing, causing a behavior to be repeated. But we do have to be really careful that the behavior we reinforce is one we actually want to see. So in this one, giving a toddler what they want to eat after they scream and yell about the vegetables that you gave them first. So when you give them, or you give in and you give them the food that they like, that reinforces that they're likely to redo the behavior again, which is the screaming and crying. So they were actually reinforced for an undesirable behavior. I'm going to tell you another little personal example is back when I was a school psychologist, it was like one of my very first placements as a school psychologist, and it was in a middle school in inner city Baltimore. It might have even been my internship. I can't remember. But there was this boy who was in what we called I think we called it a behavioral focus class. So this was a child who really struggled with his behavior, with his mood. He often had really significant temper outbursts, and he needed a lot of adult support to get through the day successfully. Well, what he would do is sometimes his behavior would be so above and beyond where he'd be aggressive towards a teacher or a student, and the administration would call his mom and tell her to come and pick him up. So she had to leave work, which was very stressful for her, come and pick up her son, take him home, and then go back to work. But oftentimes he timed his outbursts so it happened before lunch. So when she picked him up, he hadn't gotten a hot lunch from school. So she would, on her way home, stop at McDonald's and get him some sort of McDonald's lunch, drop him off, and she had to get back to work. So she was doing the best she could. She just needed to get back to work and not have her son disrupt her work to the point where she was going to get fired. So she stopped and made this quick trip. Well, for a middle school kid who misbehaved, then he got to have McDonald's, then he got to go home and lay in his bed, play video games, be on his phone, whatever it was. That was a huge reinforcer for him. So for him, mom accidentally was reinforcing negative behavior or undesirable behavior. And so in this situation, she was giving, this would probably be more example of positive reinforcement. She was giving something positive, the McDonald's, and it caused a repetition of negative behavior. So what ended up happening was we gave her some support on this, and she packed his lunch the night before and left it in the fridge. And it was stuff that was really boring, like would feed him, would nourish him, did the job, but certainly wasn't anything particularly reinforcing. And then she removed the video games and the technology from the house. And so if he was sent home, he had all the undesirable stuff taken away, or the desirable stuff was taken away. And he was punished by having the removal of desirable things. But in that circumstance, it took us a little while for us to realize that she was accidentally reinforcing that behavior. So in this example of giving in to the toddler when they scream and yell about the vegetables you gave them first, this is an example of inadvertently reinforcing negative behavior. And then the last example we have here is just if you stop nagging your spouse when he remembers to change the oil in the car. So you're removing something aversive, something negative, because he did a behavior you want him to repeat. So, I could give example after example of these things. And you see, we use reinforcement and punishment and positive and negative all throughout our day in our home life and our work life. And so it's helpful if you understand the context. Let's shift over from talking about reinforcement to talking about punishment. So despite the fact that reinforcement is really viewed to be very effective, sometimes it cannot guarantee that a child will demonstrate appropriate behavior. So some kids would much rather engage in the negative behavior or the undesirable behavior than get something positive. Like the negative behavior is so inherently reinforcing for them that giving them a reward or some sort of token isn't going to be the thing that switches them. So in that situation, punishment can be incorporated into this, hopefully in conjunction with positive reinforcement in order to maximize the likelihood that the behavior is going to stop, where it's going to be extinguished, and the positive behavior will occur. So a lot of times we have kids who engage in something negative, and the temptation can just be like, stop doing that. But in reality, it's always best if we can replace it with another behavior that meets that child's needs that is more pro-social. So if your child is engaging in misbehavior because they want all this attention, well, we want to give them attention for behaving well, we don't want to give them attention for when they misbehave, because then it's reinforcing that misbehavior and it's making it likely for them to do it again. So if we see kids, for example, engaging in undesirable behavior, we might give that consequence, right? Institute something negative to the scenario, or take away something positive in order to reduce that behavior. Okay, so two forms, adding something undesirable. So some examples of that are scolding, timeout, spanking. Those are all things that are viewed as punishment, and you're adding something desirable, which means it's positive punishment. Now, our last YouTube video, which we did 2 weeks ago, which was about spanking, we acknowledged that spanking is in fact a punishment, but we in no way endorse that as an effective strategy to use. So I'm listing it here as an illustration, but I don't want the audience to think that I'm saying spanking should be used. Scolding, I think as parents, we've all been there where we've raised our voice to send a message to our child not to do something. Timeout is really common. And then also we have the incidence, the second thing here, which is taking away something desirable after misbehavior. So they might get a removal of privileges or removal of an item. So no dessert, or you can't go on that play date. So these are things where we're taking away something desirable to deter a child from repeating a behavior. And, when it comes to determining what type of punishment we're going to use with kids, a couple things we want to think about. One, it's always nice if the punishment is related to the crime. Okay, so if I didn't clean up my room and I got spanked, like not cleaning up your room and getting spanked aren't really related. But if I don't clean up my room and then my mom comes in and says, all right, we're going to take out some of these big toys that you're not taking care of. So maybe my child leaves Legos everywhere, and there's blocks and there's crayons and pencils all over the room, and the child's been prompted to clean them up. They don't. Mom might say, hey, you're misusing your Legos. We didn't buy them for you to just throw them all over the floor. Or, we can't vacuum your room. We can't take care of your things because you won't pick it up. I'm going to go ahead and scoop up all these Legos and put them in a bin, and we're going to put them up until you feel more ready to take care of them. That makes sense. The messy room, and then they lost the item or the privilege of playing with the Legos. So same thing as, let's say you're playing outside with your child and he or she keeps running towards the road. And you say, all right, no dessert tonight. Well, how is running out in the road related to whether or not that child gets dessert? You might say, okay, if you're going to run out in the road, then we need to go play in the backyard, or we need to go inside the house because I can't trust that you're safe out here. And then hopefully kids can understand the relationship between, when I run towards the road, I don't get to do this fun thing of playing out in the front yard where maybe my neighbor's friends are out there, or maybe that's where I get to use my scooter. And they recognize, hopefully, all right, this fun thing stops when I do this, so I need to do better next time. All right, so punishment, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about spanking, is based on the idea that children need to feel worse or feel pain, shame, or humiliation to learn how to behave. The focus tends to be on the negative behavior versus a pro-social behavior. Okay, so if used excessively, and I would say that spanking is generally a punishment that I would deem as excessive. It controls behavior through power and fear. It teaches children to hide or lie about mistakes in misbehavior, and it teaches children to behave in a certain way to avoid a negative consequence or get a bribe. So ideally, when we communicate with our kids about our expectations, we aren't peppering it with threats. I mean, it's okay to say, hey, buddy, the natural consequence of you not getting your homework done before you get on Xbox means we're gonna pause on the Xbox tomorrow until all the homework's done, and you need to bring me your Chromebook and show me that you've checked off each of your assignments. Is that punishment? Yeah, they're being denied the privilege of using the Xbox until they get their work done. But it's really meant to be more in a collaborative way. Like, the Xbox is really tempting. You're worn out at the end of the day. Maybe your friends are texting you and saying they want you to be on the Xbox. Because that's really hard for you to avoid the temptation of the Xbox, I'm going to give you more support as a parent. So in this situation, being denied something desirable, which is the Xbox, in order to extinguish a misbehavior, which is blowing off homework, in favor of the Xbox, I'm absolutely giving them a punishment. But it's done in a way that's collaborative. It's meant to provide support. My voice is calm. The punishment makes sense given the misbehavior they're engaging in. And then I'm not putting him in a situation where I'm like, hey, buddy, did you get your homework done? And then he's really tempted to lie and just like, yep. And then later on, I find out he's got 3 zeros and I'm really upset. So in this situation, I'm trying to create an environment that doesn't lead to the temptation of them hiding or lying about their behavior. We're just putting a check in there. If my child brings their homework to me and they actually didn't get assignments done, I could say, well, you told me you got your work done. And so even when your homework gets done today, you're not going to get on the Xbox. We're going to try this again tomorrow. Or I can be like, come on, man, get it done. I'm here to help. What questions do you have? All right. Yep. That's right. You got it done. All right. Now it's time to go play. So it really depends on how you decide to respond and how blatantly disrespectful your child tried to be. It's really important to recognize that a lot of times when kids misbehave, they're just doing it to avoid something pleasant. They're not doing it to try to make you feel horrible or to be blatantly disrespectful or to undermine your authority. How many times as moms do we call over to our middle school sons, hey, did you brush your teeth? And they're like, yep. And then you go near them and you're like, I do not smell any toothpaste. And we could get super focused on the fact that they lied about brushing their teeth, or we can recognize they were just wanting to move on to the next thing. The word, yep, came out of their mouth super impulsively. And it's time for them to realize hey, that doesn't fly, because I can't trust that you're going to answer me honestly. Then I'm going to need to give you more support. I'm going to need to double check. I'm going to need to hang out with you in the bathroom while you brush your teeth, or you need to come to my bathroom to do it. But we're not going to just be cool with you saying you brushed your teeth when you didn't. So I really do encourage parents that punishment's fine. It's just that we don't want it to be used as a mode to inspire fear or make kids feel bad about themselves or make them feel like they're failing. I did want to note that punishment is not something that's exclusive to kids. It happens in adult world all the time. And I gave some examples here, and it really, are common sense things. If I don't pay my electric bill, my heat will be turned off. So in order to punish me for not paying my electric bill, I lose something desirable. I'm losing my heat. Okay. If I speed, I might get a ticket and owe $200. So I engaged in a misbehavior. I was punished by being given a ticket. Okay. And as a result of getting that ticket, I lose $200. So I'm losing something desirable. And I know as an adult, even though I do respect the laws of the road, there are times when no one's around, or I'm really in a rush and I think this isn't a big deal. And one of the things that deters me is not wanting to get caught. So that's a natural process of punishment in our world. If I drink and drive, I could lose my license, be fined, serve time in jail. I could harm other people, myself, or property. If I'm late to work too many times, I may be fired. So in each of these circumstances, I either experienced something undesirable, something undesirable was added to the scene, or I lost something desirable. Either way, they're forms of punishment, and they happen all the time in adult world too. So sometimes people think that punishment is just something that we reserve for children, but that's not true. The main one we reserve for children is spanking. There's no adult who spanks another adult to punish them. And so part of our presentation last week was pointing out, why would we introduce spanking as a punishment for kids when there's nowhere else in the world, in regular society, where that would be an acceptable way to give consequences for a misbehavior. So, separate those two things out. Spanking is a form of punishment that is generally done to inspire fear or pain. And oftentimes the person who's implementing the spanking is feeling out of control. They're feeling angry. They're feeling almost spiteful or vengeful. That's not how we want to go about exposing our kids to punishment. That's just not a healthy way. So, and then the last thing I wanted to say about this is that punishment should not be excessive or applied unfairly. It should be administered with an attempt to deter behavior versus revenge or spite. And as an educator, I used to be a school psychologist. I have, taught at the college level. And of course, I write books. I definitely view myself to be an educator. I have to also be mindful that punishment is applied fairly. We know that kids, not even just kids, people of color are more likely to experience more significant punishments for things. We know that bias can influence how we perceive a behavior. There might be some kids who we perceive a misbehavior to be kind of a youthful indiscretion or just a mistake, and other kids who we might view it as being a more deliberate or more disrespectful. And if we're basing that opinion on something that's discriminatory, then it's up to us to make sure that we're doing the work that needs to be done so that we can apply punishment when necessary in a really healthy, fair, reasonable way. And I tell parents, if you have a misbehavior that's this severe, and for those of you who are watching, I'm kind of holding up my hand part way, you want to have a consequence or a punishment that is about this significant. So we don't have a misbehavior like leaving our kids' shoes by the back door. It's a misbehavior, but not life or death, no big deal. And when we don't have a consequence that's over the top, where now you've lost your phone for 2 weeks, that doesn't make sense, okay? Finding out your kid sent a racist meme to, a neighbor, okay, that's a much higher misbehavior that warrants a consequence that's much more significant, and we want them to match. So I really encourage parents, when we think about what consequence or punishment to give or what reinforcer to give, that it really matches what the behavior is. So if our kid does something good, so let's say we say, oh, could you bring your plate over to the sink? And they do that, we don't want to give them a $20 tangible item to reward that, because that would be a small positive behavior and giving a huge high reward. And that just doesn't make sense. That's not really, whereas if you say, oh, thank you so much for your help, I really appreciate that. Or you say, hey, Dad, did you notice how helpful Son's been all day today? He just helped me carry all those dishes over to the sink. Giving some praise, acknowledging the positive behavior, really encouraging that behavior to happen again, but then you move on with our day because it's kind of a small behavior and deserves a momentary reinforcer that's in line with the behavior. All right, let me see. I think we're in the question and answer portion. I'm not seeing any questions pop up, which means I'm hoping that I explained this really well. So I really do encourage you to look back at this slide or look back at this video if you get confused. And the main purpose behind it is not to quiz you in terms and definitions, but for you just to understand there's a couple different types of punishment and there's a couple different types of reinforcers. And you want to make sure that you're using the punishment or the reinforcer that really is going to benefit that circumstance and be in line with how your child understands the world. There's some kids who need to experience kind of a negative consequence before they really get it. They really need to kind of live it. Other kids, just watching someone else experience a consequence is enough for them. Or when the teacher says, I like the way that Elizabeth is sitting on their bottom right now. I love the way her hands are folded and she's ready to learn. And then you have another little girl who's not even the person getting the praise, but that reinforcer is enough to encourage positive behavior in her. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do that to support kids and really looking to see what your kids benefit from. And if you're a parent who's doing a lot of yelling, a lot of taking away things, having them being sent to their room, just scolding, things like that, it's important to just step back and reflect. Are you noticing the times when they're doing something positive? Are you catching them being good? Because we want to take advantage of the times that they're exhibiting really positive behavior and increasing those. Because the more time your child spends doing something positive, the less time they actually even have to misbehave. So as much as possible, we want to fill their day with opportunities to engage in a positive way, so that it's not so tempting to engage in behavior that is undesirable. So if you are a parent out there who wants to learn more forms of discipline and find out how to encourage positive behaviors, definitely reach out to me. I am always here to provide one-on-one coaching for your family. And you can go ahead and visit drtaraegan.com to find out more about those services. I also do encourage you to do two other things. If you have a middle school or high school student, please join our Facebook page, our private Facebook group. It's called Adolescents and Parents Guides, a support group for high school parents. And then also tune into the podcast, which is called One Day You'll Thank Me. And it releases episodes every Wednesday. And my co-host is my teenage daughter. And so some weeks we do episodes that are solo episode between Anna and myself, and other times, most of the time, we interview guest experts on a variety of topics that are really in depth. So when I do these parenting webinars, obviously I'm restricting the content to things that I know a lot about, that I am actively using in my counseling work, in my coaching work, and that I have training and expertise in. But with the podcast, it really allows me to tap into the knowledge and expertise of somebody who works in a field that I'm not familiar enough with. So we've had podcast episodes on eating disorders, porn addiction. We've talked to teachers and pediatricians and school resource officers and student athletes and occupational therapists and sleep specialists and just really, really talented people. And they're helping me provide a resource that gives extensive information on topics that fall outside my area of expertise. So I really do encourage you to tune into those episodes. You can find them on any of your favorite podcasting platform. And if you listen to an episode and you really like it, leave us a review, because it's certainly encouraging to Anna and I when we know what episodes speak to you the most. So thank you so much for being part of the presentation today. I hope that I was my normal energetic self. I am lucky enough to have received the second Pfizer vaccine for COVID-19 yesterday. So I'm definitely feeling a little bit fatigued, a little achy today. So hopefully that didn't come across in the presentation. So thank you so much for being here. Tune in 2 weeks. We are going to talk about YouTube. We're going to talk about what it is, things to be mindful of, what the impact is on kids, ways to use it in a safe way. So tune in for that, because most of you out there have kids who love YouTube. All right. Have a good day.